The restaurant doors slammed shut with a metallic clang that made everyone's heads turn. I watched my husband stand up, not beside me, but next to a woman I'd never seen before. And that's when I knew. 3 months of hell had led to this moment, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it really started, back when I still thought I knew who I was. 3 months earlier, I was sitting in our living room in Phoenix, watching the sunset paint the desert sky orange and pink. Our house had always been my pride. Adobe walls, that beautiful backyard with the saguaro cacti, the terracotta tiles I'd picked out myself 23 years ago. My husband Richard was in his study, door closed, like always. My daughter Amanda was upstairs, probably on her phone. My son Tyler had just left after Sunday dinner, barely saying goodbye. Normal. Everything was so perfectly, painfully normal. I sat there with a cup of chamomile tea growing cold in my hands, watching the light fade from the sky. There's something about desert sunsets that makes you feel small. All that vast emptiness, those mountains in the distance standing like ancient sentinels. I used to find it peaceful. That evening, it just made me feel alone. The house was too quiet. It had been too quiet for years, but I'd convinced myself that quiet meant peaceful. That silence was the same as contentment. I'd stopped recognizing the difference between the two somewhere along the way. Stopped noticing when the comfortable pauses became uncomfortable voids. I remember thinking how lucky I was. Married for 25 years to a successful real estate developer, 2 grown kids who seemed to have their lives together, a comfortable home, enough money to not worry. I'd done everything right, hadn't I? I'd raised good children, supported my husband's career, kept a beautiful home. I'd earned this peace. But even as I told myself this, something gnawed at me. A small voice I'd been ignoring for months, maybe years. The voice that noticed how Richard flinched when I touched him, how my children's conversations with me felt rehearsed, like they were following a script, how I'd become background noise in my own life. I pushed the thoughts away. My therapist, yes, I had a therapist, though I'd told no one about it, said I had a tendency toward catastrophic thinking. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just being dramatic, looking for problems where none existed because I was bored or restless or entering some kind of midlife crisis. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday. I was doing laundry, Richard's shirts, like I'd done 1,000 times before, when I found a receipt in his pocket. Dinner at Marcello's, one of the nicest Italian places in Scottsdale, $473. The date was last Thursday when he told me he was working late on the Henderson property deal. My hands started shaking. I sat down on the laundry room floor, that stupid receipt burning in my palm like evidence of something I didn't want to name. The tile was cold beneath me. I could hear the hum of the washing machine, steady and mechanical, while my whole world tilted sideways. $473. I turned the number over in my mind, trying to make it make sense. That wasn't a quick business dinner. That was champagne, appetizers, expensive entrees, probably dessert. That was celebration. That was romance. I studied the receipt like it was a puzzle I could solve. 2 entrees, a bottle of wine, the expensive kind, from the reserve list. Creme brulee for 2. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack right through. But I didn't confront him, not yet. Because here's the thing about 25 years of marriage, you learn to explain things away. Maybe it was a business dinner he forgot to mention. Maybe the Henderson deal involved wining and dining clients. Maybe. I'd built a fortress of maybes over the years, and I wasn't ready to watch it crumble. I folded that receipt and tucked it into the pocket of my jeans, carried it around like a talisman or a curse, taking it out when I was alone to stare at it, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into something innocent. That night at dinner, I watched him. Really watched him. The way he checked his phone constantly, how his eyes never quite met mine when I asked about his day. He was there, but he wasn't. Like a hologram of the man I'd married, all surface and no substance. "How was the Henderson deal?" I asked, keeping my voice light and casual. "Fine," he said, not looking up from his phone. "We're close to closing. Did you have to wine and dine them? You know, take them somewhere nice?" His fingers paused on the screen for just a fraction of a second. "No, just standard meetings. Nothing fancy." The lie hung in the air between us. I could taste it, metallic and bitter. But I smiled and nodded and passed him the salad bowl, playing my part in our elaborate theater of pretend. And my kids? They seemed different too. Tense. Amanda kept glancing at her father, these weird loaded looks I couldn't decode. Tyler called less, made excuses not to come over. I felt like I was living in a house full of strangers who happened to know my name. I started questioning myself. Was I being paranoid? Dramatic? My mother always said I had an overactive imagination. Richard had been working so hard lately, providing for us like he always had. The kids were just busy with their own lives, which is normal, right? They're adults now. They don't need to hold their mother's hand. I told myself these things while staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m, listening to Richard snore beside me. I told myself these things while making breakfast nobody ate. I told myself these things until I almost believed them. But my body knew the truth before my mind accepted it. I started losing weight. Not from dieting, but from anxiety eating at my stomach. Food tasted like cardboard. Sleep became impossible. I'd wake up at 2, 3, 4 a.m, my mind racing with scenarios I didn't want to consider. The thing about reciprocity is that it's supposed to go both ways. I'd given everything, my 20s, my 30s, my 40s. Hell, I was staring down 55 now, to this family. I'd sacrificed, and sacrifice is supposed to mean something. It's supposed to buy you loyalty, love, security. That's the deal, right? You pour yourself into people, and they pour themselves back into you. I know you're sitting there thinking I should have seen it coming. Maybe you're even frustrated with me. But love isn't blind. It's paralyzed. It's watching the train come down the tracks and convincing yourself it'll stop. It has to stop. Because what's the alternative? The alternative was unthinkable. I kept finding little things. A charge on our credit card for flowers I never received. A new cologne in his bathroom that made my stomach turn. Late-night phone calls he took in the garage. Each discovery was like a paper cut. Small, stinging, easy to ignore individually, but collectively bleeding me dry. I started keeping a list. I know that sounds pathetic, but I needed to see it all written down. Needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. The list grew longer every week. February 14th, Valentine's Day, he told me he had to work late. Came home at midnight smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. March 3rd, found a receipt for lingerie, size small. I'm a medium, always have been. The evidence piled up like stones, building a wall between who I thought I was and who I was becoming. The suspicious wife, the paranoid woman, the character in a story I never wanted to be in. Amanda came over for lunch one afternoon. We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd taught her to make chocolate chip cookies when she was 7. She couldn't look at me. Just pushed her salad around her plate and made small talk about her marketing job, her apartment, anything except what was sitting between us like an elephant wearing a party hat. "How's Dad?" she asked finally, and something in her voice made my skin prickle. "Fine," I said. "Why?" "Just wondering." She stabbed at a tomato with her fork. "You guys seem, I don't know, different lately." This was it, my chance to ask, to demand the truth, to break through whatever wall had been built around me. But fear froze my tongue, because asking meant hearing an answer I might not survive. "We're fine," I said instead. "Just the usual stress." She nodded, relieved, and changed the subject. We finished lunch making hollow conversation, and when she left, I stood at the door watching her drive away, wondering when I'd become too scared to talk to my own daughter. I wanted to grab her shoulders and shake her, demand to know what was happening. But I didn't, because somewhere deep down, I was terrified of the answer. I spent 25 years being the perfect wife. I learned to make Richard's coffee exactly how he liked it. 2 sugars, splash of cream, in the blue mug, never the white one. I remembered every client's birthday, sent anniversary cards on his behalf, organized his sock drawer by color. I made myself indispensable, thinking that's what love was, becoming exactly what someone else needed. But here's what nobody tells you about making yourself indispensable. You disappear in the process. I used to paint. Did you know that? Watercolors mostly. Desert landscapes, portraits of the kids when they were little. I had dreams of maybe selling them at one of those art walks downtown. Nothing big, just something that was mine. I gave it up when Tyler was born. No time, Richard said. The kids need you, he said. And he was right, wasn't he? Good mother's sacrifice. I gave up my painting, then my book club, then lunches with girlfriends. One by one, pieces of me dissolved like sugar in hot water, until all that was left was wife, mother, housekeeper, a holy trinity of service with no room for self. My closet still had clothes from 15 years ago. Not because they were vintage or sentimental, because I'd stopped buying new ones. Why bother? Who was I dressing for? I'd catch glimpses of myself in mirrors and not recognize the woman staring back. When did I get so small? When did I start taking up so little space? I remember the exact moment I realized I'd lost myself. Tyler's graduation from college 5 years ago. Everyone was taking pictures, and I saw myself in one of them. This faded woman in a beige dress standing slightly apart from the group, like I was photobombed into my own family photo. Even my smile looked like it belonged to someone else. Someone had asked me that day, "And what do you do?" I'd opened my mouth to answer and realized I had nothing to say. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm nothing. Nothing that was mine anyway. I started reading about narcissistic families, about golden children and scapegoats, about how some parents train their kids to defend them, to choose sides, to become little soldiers in wars the children didn't start. And it clicked. The way Amanda defended her father when I'd mentioned he was working late again. The way Tyler changed the subject whenever I tried to talk about feeling lonely. They'd been trained, and I'd been too buried in my role to see it. Research shows that the golden child in a narcissistic family structure will often defend the narcissistic parent against any perceived threat, even from the other parent. They're rewarded with attention, approval, conditional love that feels real when you're drowning in the need to be chosen. And my kids? They'd been chosen. I hadn't. The discovery came at what was supposed to be a business dinner. Richard told me we were meeting investors for a new development project near Tempe. "Wear something nice," he said. "This is important." I should have known. The restaurant was too fancy for a business meeting. Marcello's. The same place from the receipt I'd found weeks ago. The same place I'd been erasing from my memory, convincing myself it meant nothing. I wore the black dress, the one I saved for special occasions. Spent an hour on my hair and makeup, wanting to look good, to remind him of who I used to be. How pathetic is that? Getting dolled up for my own ambush. We arrived separately. He came from the office, I drove myself. That should have been a red flag too, but I was still playing my role, still being the supportive wife who doesn't make waves. The parking lot was full. I remember that detail because I had to circle twice to find a spot, and by the time I walked in, I was already anxious. Something felt wrong. The air felt charged, like before a thunderstorm. The table was set for 6. Richard, me, Amanda, Tyler, and 2 empty seats that made my chest tighten. I looked at my kids, really looked at them, and saw guilt written all over their faces. The kind of guilt that comes before a confession, before everything changes. "What's going on?" I asked, hearing the tremor in my own voice. "Mom," Amanda started, but Tyler cut her off. "Just sit down," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Please." Then the doors locked. I heard the click, that awful metallic sound, and my head whipped around. The restaurant manager was standing by the entrance with this apologetic expression, and that's when she walked in. Beautiful, young, maybe 35, professional suit, confident walk. The kind of woman who knows exactly what she wants and how to get it. She moved through the restaurant like she owned it, her heels clicking on the tile floor. Other diners glanced up, then away, sensing drama they didn't want to be part of. The air felt thick, hard to breathe. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. She sat down in one of the empty seats. Richard sat in the other. Not beside me, beside her. That detail cut deeper than it should have. In that moment, the seating arrangement told me everything. My daughter wouldn't look at me. My son cleared his throat, stared at his water glass like it held the secrets of the universe. And my husband, the man I'd been married to for a quarter of a century, smiled. Actually smiled. Have you ever had a moment where your brain just refuses to process what's happening? Where reality becomes this slippery thing you can't quite grasp? That was me, sitting there in a locked restaurant, watching my husband hold another woman's hand while my children sat silent as witnesses. The woman's name was Jessica. She introduced herself like we were at a cocktail party. "Hi, I'm Jessica. I'm sorry to meet you like this, but Richard and I thought it was time everyone knew. We've been together for 3 years. 3 years." The words echoed in my head, bouncing around like they were trying to find somewhere to land, somewhere to make sense. 3 years. 1,095 days. All those dinners I'd cooked. All those shirts I'd folded. All those nights I'd lain beside him, believing we were building a future together. I'd been folding his laundry for 3 years while he built a whole other life. I'd been asking about his day for 3 years while he lied to my face. I'd been sleeping next to him for 3 years while he planned my replacement. The room started spinning. I gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white, trying to anchor myself to something solid. The tablecloth was crisp white linen, probably expensive. I focused on the weave, the texture, anything to keep from screaming. Amanda reached for my hand, and I jerked away like her touch burned. "Don't," I said. "Don't you dare touch me." Her face crumpled, but I couldn't care. Not then. Not when she'd sat there knowing what was about to happen, knowing they were about to detonate my entire existence. Richard started talking. Words like grown apart and different paths and deserve to be happy. Corporate speak for I'm leaving you. Dressed up in therapeutic language like that made it hurt less. Jessica nodded along, supportive girlfriend playing her part. And my kids? They just sat there, complicit. That's the word that kept echoing in my head. Complicit. "How long have you known?" I asked them, my voice surprisingly steady. Silence. Tyler shifted in his seat. Amanda studied her napkin. "How long?" "A few months," Amanda whispered. "A few months." They'd known for months and said nothing. Sat at Sunday dinners and made small talk while I served pot roast and pretended everything was fine. Let me hug them goodbye, tell them I loved them, while they held this secret like a knife behind their backs. I felt my reflection in the polished tabletop staring back at me, distorted and wrong. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Good wives who sacrifice get rewarded, don't they? Good mothers who give everything get loved in return. That's the contract. That's the deal. But nobody signed that contract except me. I excused myself to the bathroom, walked on shaking legs past tables of happy diners who had no idea they were extras in the worst scene of my life. A couple was celebrating an anniversary. I heard the waiter bringing out cake, everyone singing. The contrast was surreal, obscene, life going on while mine ended. Locked myself in a stall and tried to breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in, the air too thick, my lungs too small. I counted to 10, then 20, then gave up counting. Someone had scratched graffiti into the stall door. "You deserve better." The irony wasn't lost on me. When I finally looked in the mirror, I broke. The woman staring back at me was a stranger. Gray hair I'd been meaning to color for months. Lines around my eyes that mapped every sleepless night, every swallowed complaint, every time I'd chosen peace over truth. Skin that looked paper thin, like if you poked it too hard, I'd just deflate. My mascara was running, leaving black tracks down my cheeks. I looked like a sad clown, a tragic figure in some dark comedy I never auditioned for. I didn't recognize her. This woman who'd let herself disappear. This woman who'd traded her identity for the illusion of security. This woman who'd believed that sacrifice equaled love, that giving everything meant you'd earned forever. I cried. Ugly, choking sobs that came from somewhere deep and primal. I cried for the girl who used to paint. For the woman who'd wanted more but convinced herself this was enough. For all the years I'd spent becoming smaller, quieter, less, thinking that's what good wives did. The bathroom door opened. Amanda's voice, tentative and guilty. "Mom, are you okay? Was I okay?" My husband was out there holding his mistress's hand while my children watched. I'd just learned I'd been lied to for 3 years. My entire life was a sham built on false premises and broken promises. Was I okay? "Go away," I said. "Mom, please." I said, "Go away." I heard her footsteps retreat. Good. I didn't want her comfort, her guilty apologies, her attempts to smooth this over. I wanted to break something. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rewind time and be someone different, someone who would have seen this coming, someone who would have protected herself. I splashed cold water on my face and walked out. Amanda tried to hug me, and I pushed past her. I went back to that table where Richard and Jessica sat like they were the victims here, like I was the problem they'd solve together. I looked at my husband and said the only thing I could manage. I want a divorce. He had the audacity to look relieved. That's when I became my own ally, my own detective, my own goddamn savior, because clearly no one else was coming. I went home that night, to the house I'd decorated, the bed I'd made, the life I'd built, and I got to work. If my family wanted to betray me, fine, but they weren't taking everything. Not my dignity, not my future, not one more piece of my soul. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember getting in my car, starting the engine, navigating the familiar streets. Autopilot. My body knew the way, even when my brain was screaming. When I walked through the door, the house felt different. Same furniture, same walls, same smell of the lavender candles I always kept burning. But it wasn't mine anymore. Or maybe it had never been mine. Maybe I'd just been a guest in a life someone else was directing. I started in Richard's study. 25 years of marriage meant I knew where he kept everything. The safe behind the painting of Monument Valley, his grandmother's birthday, same combination he'd used since we got married. Inside were documents, account statements, property deeds. I photographed everything. My hands were steady now. The shock had burned away, leaving something harder, colder, determination, rage, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The joint accounts were next. I made spreadsheets, tracked every deposit and withdrawal for the past 5 years. Patterns emerged. Money transferred to accounts I didn't recognize. Cash withdrawals that didn't match his story about where he'd been. A whole financial life I'd been excluded from while he used my name on everything. It was 2 a.m. when I finally stopped, surrounded by papers and files, my laptop open to a dozen tabs of bank statements and credit card records. I'd built a case, not just for a divorce, but for war. I learned something important during those long nights hunched over my laptop. Research shows that half of all people with dementia experience some form of abuse, often financial exploitation by family members they trust. I didn't have dementia, but I'd been in a fog just as thick. A fog of belief, of wanting my marriage to be real so badly that I couldn't see how I was being used. I'd been gaslit for years. Every time I questioned something, Richard made me feel crazy. "You're imagining things. You're being paranoid. Why don't you trust me?" He turned my doubts into character flaws, my intuition into hysteria. But not anymore. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Carmen who came highly recommended. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, the kind of person who'd seen enough to not be shocked by anything. She found things I'd missed. Hotel receipts, plane tickets to San Diego where Jessica lived, Joint credit cards in Richard's and Jessica's names, opened 2 years ago. 2 years. They'd been planning this for 2 years while I folded his underwear and pretended everything was fine. Carmen didn't judge. She just handed me folder after folder of evidence, her expression sympathetic, but professional. "You've got a good case," she said. "He's been sloppy. Men like him always are. They think they're too smart to get caught." I changed passwords, slowly, carefully, one at a time. Email accounts, bank logins, the password to our home security system. I created new accounts in my name only, transferred money, not illegally, just what was rightfully mine from joint accounts, into places he couldn't touch. Every small change felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Every document I secured, every account I protected, I was building a fortress. Not to keep others out, but to keep me safe inside. Amanda called. I didn't answer. Tyler texted. I blocked him. They'd made their choice at that restaurant, sitting silent while I was ambushed. They could live with it. I saw a lawyer, a really good one who specialized in high-asset divorces. She was brilliant, ruthless in the way you want your attorney to be. She looked at my evidence and smiled. "You've got everything you need," she said. "He won't know what hit him." Her name was Patricia Chen, and she had a reputation for destroying cheating spouses in court. She charged $400 an hour, and she was worth every penny. I started going through our house, room by room, dividing things in my mind. What was mine before the marriage? What I'd bought with my own money? What I'd created? Those watercolors in the attic, the ones I'd painted in my 20s before I became Mrs. Richard Thompson, those were mine. The antique dresser my grandmother left me, mine. The collection of first edition books I'd been building since college, mine, mine, mine. For years, everything had been ours. Our house, our money, our life. But ours really meant his, with me as a supporting player. Not anymore. I was drawing lines, claiming territory, staking flags in the ground of my own existence. I found things during my search. Love letters between Richard and Jessica, hidden in his desk drawer. Plans for a condo they were buying together in San Diego. Receipts for jewelry I'd never seen, dinners I'd never attended, a whole parallel universe where I didn't exist. The evidence was damning, but more than that, it was liberating. Every piece of proof was validation that I wasn't crazy, that my intuition had been right all along, that the stranger in the mirror wasn't weak. She was waking up. I decided to confront them on my terms this time, not in some locked restaurant with an audience, but in our home. The home I'd built, the home I'd earned, the home I was about to take back. I invited Richard, Amanda, and Tyler over for dinner. "A family meeting," I said. "We need to talk." They came because they thought they'd already won. Richard probably thought I was going to beg, to negotiate, to make some desperate plea for him to stay. Amanda and Tyler probably thought I needed them to manage me, to smooth things over, to play mediator in the mess they'd helped create. They had no idea what was coming. I set the table with our good china, the dishes we only used for Thanksgiving and Christmas, the ones that had been a wedding gift from Richard's parents. I made his favorite meal, pot roast with roasted vegetables, the recipe his mother taught me, the one I'd perfected over 25 years of Sunday dinners. The house smelled amazing. Rosemary and garlic, rich beef, the yeasty warmth of fresh bread. I'd even made his favorite dessert, apple pie with the lattice crust that took forever to weave. If this was going to be our last supper, it would be on my terms. They arrived together. Of course they did. The three of them, united front, coming to deal with difficult mom who wouldn't accept change gracefully. I could see it in their faces, the resignation mixed with impatience. "Let's get this over with." I greeted them at the door with a smile, hugged Amanda even though she stiffened in my arms, kissed Tyler's cheek, acted like everything was normal, like my world hadn't imploded 2 weeks ago. We sat. We ate. I made small talk about the weather, about Amanda's job, about Tyler's new apartment. Normal conversation, the kind we'd had 1,000 times. They relaxed a little, probably thinking I was in denial, avoiding the inevitable. Richard even smiled at me. This is great, honey. Just like old times. I smiled back. Isn't it? Then I brought out the folders, 3 of them, neatly labeled, evidence, assets, divorce. I placed them on the table between the pot roast and the green beans like they were dessert. Richard's face went pale. What is this? I smiled. This is the part where I stop being the victim. I opened the first folder. Bank statements with his transfers highlighted in yellow. Hotel receipts. Photos the private investigator had taken. Richard and Jessica holding hands on a beach in California, kissing outside her apartment, looking at each other the way he used to look at me before I became invisible. Coronado Beach, I said conversationally. Beautiful spot. You told me you were in Vegas for that convention. Amanda made a small noise, somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. Tyler just stared. I opened the second folder. Property deeds, account statements, a complete inventory of everything we owned and where it came from. What was mine before the marriage, what I'd contributed, what I'd earned. Turns out Mrs. Richard Thompson hadn't been as financially helpless as everyone assumed. Did you know, I said, that the down payment for this house came from my inheritance? My father died 6 months before we bought it. That money was mine. Richard's jaw clenched. That was a long time ago. Community property law says otherwise. The third folder was the divorce papers, already drawn up, already filed. I just needed his signature. You've been planning this, Richard said, and he sounded almost impressed. For 3 months, I said. The same amount of time it took you to plan my humiliation at Marcello's. Seems fair. I looked at my children then. Amanda with tears running down her face. Tyler with his jaw clenched tight. You knew, I said. Both of you knew. And you said nothing. You sat there at that restaurant and let him ambush me, let him parade his mistress in front of me like I was nothing. Mom, Amanda started, but I held up my hand. Don't you dare make excuses. I raised you better than this. I raised you to have integrity, to stand up for what's right. But you chose him. You chose the parent who could give you things over the parent who gave you everything. That's not fair, Tyler said, finding his voice. You don't understand. What don't I understand? That your father bought your loyalty? That you both knew he was cheating on me and decided I didn't deserve to know? Tyler tried to speak. We thought you knew. We thought you were okay with it. I laughed. It came out harsh and brittle, nothing like my usual laugh. You thought I was okay with my husband cheating on me for 3 years? With being lied to? With my entire life being a sham? What kind of person do you think I am? Silence, the kind that's heavy and suffocating. I told them everything I'd discovered, every lie, every betrayal, every way Richard had manipulated our family finances for his benefit. How he'd been funneling money into accounts I couldn't access. How he'd been building a future with Jessica while pretending to build one with me. The room felt too small suddenly, like the walls were closing in, all of us trapped in this moment of reckoning. Richard tried to defend himself, made excuses about falling out of love, growing apart, needing to find happiness. Like happiness was something you found outside yourself, like it justified destroying someone else's world. I listened. I let him talk. And when he was done, I said the only thing that mattered. Sign the papers. He looked at the divorce agreement, at the division of assets my lawyer had drawn up. It was fair. More than fair, really. But it left him with less than he'd expected, and that's what hurt. Not losing me, losing money. What about the house? He asked. What about it? I said. I'm keeping it, unless you want to buy me out for its full market value. His face went red. That's not fair. We built this together. No, I said. I built this. You just lived in it. I could see him calculating. Trying to figure out how to negotiate. But there was nothing to negotiate. I had evidence. I had proof. I had a lawyer who knew every trick in the book, and I had the moral high ground. For once, I held all the cards. Sign the papers, Richard. Or I'll take every single thing I've found to your business partners, to your clients, To everyone who thinks you're some upstanding community member. Let's see how many real estate deals you close when everyone knows you're a cheating liar. He signed. Amanda was crying openly now. Tyler looked sick. They were seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time in years. Not as mom, not as the woman who made dinner and did their laundry when they visited. As a person. Someone with agency, with power, with the ability to fight back. I looked at my children and felt something complicated. Love mixed with betrayal, disappointment mixed with hope. They were adults. They'd made their choices. But they were still my kids, and some part of me would always want to fix this. But not today. Today, I needed them to sit with what they'd done. You can have a relationship with your father, I said. That's your choice. But if you want a relationship with me, you're going to have to earn it back. Starting with an apology. A real one. They left. All three of them. Richard with his signed divorce papers, Amanda and Tyler with guilt etched on their faces. I locked the door behind them and stood in my quiet house, my house, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Free. The justice that followed wasn't just legal. It was poetic. Richard lost access to our joint accounts. He'd been using them to fund his life with Jessica, and suddenly that tap was turned off. My lawyer was ruthless. She found every loophole, every bit of leverage, every way to make sure I got what I deserved. The house was mine. Most of our savings were mine. His business took a hit when word got out, not through me, but through the network of women in Phoenix who talk, who share, who protect each other from men like Richard. Suddenly, clients didn't want to work with him. Partners distanced themselves. Patricia was brilliant in court. She laid out the evidence methodically, building a case so airtight that Richard's lawyer could barely mount a defense. The judge, a woman in her 60s who'd probably seen 1,000 cases like mine, looked at Richard with undisguised disgust. Amanda and Tyler tried to maintain relationships with both of us, but it was awkward. They'd call me, tentative and guilty, trying to bridge a gap they'd helped create. I wasn't cruel, but I wasn't accommodating either. They needed to learn that choices have consequences. Jessica got what she wanted, Richard, minus the money and status. The condo they were buying fell through when his finances tanked. The lavish lifestyle he'd promised her evaporated. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they fought constantly. Turns out, when you build a relationship on lies and betrayal, the foundation isn't very stable. Richard's own family turned on him. His brother called me to apologize. His mother sent flowers. Not everyone chose him, and that probably hurt more than losing the money. But here's the thing about external justice. It's satisfying, sure. Watching karma do its work feels good. But it wasn't what healed me. That came from somewhere else entirely. I started focusing on myself. Not in a bubble bath and wine way, though there was some of that, but in a real, transformative way. I joined a gym, not to lose weight or look better, but to feel strong. To reclaim the body I'd neglected for years while taking care of everyone else. I hired a trainer named Marco, who was in his 60s and had this philosophy about fitness being about power, not appearance. We worked on strength training, building muscle, building resilience. Every weight I lifted felt like shedding a layer of the past. "You're stronger than you think," Marco would say, spotting me through a difficult set. And slowly, I started to believe him. I started running. Something I'd never done before. At first, I could barely make it around the block, but I kept going. 3 times a week, then 4, then 5. There's something meditative about running, about the repetition, about pushing through the voice that says you can't. I ran through my neighborhood, past the park where I used to take Amanda and Tyler when they were little, past the coffee shop where Richard and I used to have Sunday breakfast before kids. The landscape of my life. But I was seeing it differently now. Not as a wife, not as a mother, but as myself. My body changed, got stronger, leaner, more defined. But that was just the surface. What really changed was how I felt inside my own skin. Like I belonged there. like I had a right to take up space. I started painting again. Set up an easel in the spare bedroom, Tyler's old room, before he moved out. Bought new supplies, good ones. Not the cheap student-grade stuff I used to use. I painted the desert, the mountains, the sunsets that had always taken my breath away. My paintings were different now. Bolder, more honest, less concerned with making something pretty, and more focused on expressing something true. I joined an art group, met other women who'd also rediscovered passions they'd buried. We had wine and painted and talked about lives we'd lost and found. One woman, Margaret, was 70 and had just left her husband after 40 years. I woke up one day and realized I'd been dead for decades, she said, and I decided I'd rather be alive. We became friends, real friends, the kind who knew each other's worst stories and loved each other anyway. I started doing yoga. The instructor, Sarah, was this Zen-like woman who talked about breath and presence and being exactly where you are. I was terrible at it at first. My body was stiff, my mind restless. But slowly, I learned to breathe. To be still. To exist in the moment without guilt or anxiety. I found parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. The woman who laughed easily, who had opinions about politics and art and what made a good book, who enjoyed her own company, who didn't need constant validation to feel worthy. I made new friends, women who knew me as just me, not as Richard's wife or Amanda and Tyler's mom, women who valued me for my thoughts, my humor, my presence. We went to movies and dinners and hiking trips. Simple things that felt revolutionary because I was doing them for myself. I traveled, took a trip to Santa Fe by myself, spent a week wandering art galleries and eating at restaurants where nobody knew my story. I felt anonymous and free, like I could be anyone, which meant I could be myself. In a small gallery on Canyon Road, I met an artist who looked at my work. I'd brought photos on my phone and said, "You should submit to the summer show. These are good." "Really?" I asked, shocked. "Really. You have a voice. Don't hide it." I looked in the mirror one morning, 6 months after the divorce was finalized, and saw someone I recognized. Not the faded woman from that restaurant bathroom. Not the girl from my 20s. But someone new. Someone who carried all those versions but wasn't defined by them. I was 55 years old. I'd lost 25 years to a man who didn't deserve them. But I'd gained something too. Clarity, strength, the knowledge that I could survive the worst and come out whole. Amanda called one day and asked if we could talk. Really talk. She came over, sat at my kitchen table, and cried. Told me she was ashamed of herself, that she'd been so caught up in staying in her father's good graces that she'd betrayed me, that she was sorry. "I was scared," she said. "Dad always made it seem like if we didn't side with him, we'd lose everything. The money for my car, help with my apartment, just everything. And I chose wrong. I chose him over you, and I'm so sorry." I forgave her. Not all at once, but slowly. Forgiveness isn't an event. It's a process. We started rebuilding our relationship, this time on honesty instead of obligation. Tyler took longer, but eventually he came around too. Admitted that he'd been selfish, that he'd chosen the easier path over the right one. We're still working on it, him and me. But we're working on it. The rebirth wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a phoenix rising from ashes moment. It was quieter than that. It was morning runs and painting sessions and yoga classes. It was learning to cook for one without feeling lonely. It was sleeping in the middle of the bed because I could. It was reclaiming every inch of space I'd given away. Before I end my story, I want to share something important I learned through all of this. Something I wish someone had told me years ago. Possible recovery is real. I need you to understand that. If you're in a situation like I was, trapped by your own sacrifices, betrayed by people you trusted, lost in a life that doesn't feel like yours anymore, there is a way out, and there is a life waiting for you on the other side. Here are the real steps I took to rebuild, and I'm sharing them because they work. Not in a magical overnight way, but in a gradual, sustainable way that actually lasts. First, acknowledge the truth. Stop making excuses for other people's behavior. Stop gaslighting yourself. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Your intuition isn't your enemy, it's trying to save you. Listen to it. Second, document everything. I cannot stress this enough. If you suspect betrayal, financial abuse, manipulation, document it. Screenshots, photos, copies of statements, recordings if your state allows it. Evidence isn't just for legal battles. It's for those moments when you start doubting yourself, when you wonder if you're overreacting. Having proof grounds you in reality. Third, secure your finances. Open an account in your name only. Know what money you have, where it is, and how to access it. Financial dependency is one of the main reasons people stay in bad situations. Freedom requires resources. Fourth, find your people. Not your family, not necessarily, but people who see you as you are and want what's best for you. A therapist, a support group, friends who won't tell you to just forgive and move on. You need witnesses to your truth, people who validate your reality when everyone else is trying to rewrite it. Fifth, invest in yourself. This sounds cheesy, but it's crucial. Take that class you always wanted to take. Learn that skill you gave up. Exercise, not to change how you look, but to feel powerful in your body. Reclaim the parts of yourself you sacrificed. They're still there, waiting. Sixth, set boundaries and enforce them. People who've benefited from your boundaryless giving will not like this. They'll call you selfish, dramatic, ungrateful. Let them. Your responsibility is to protect yourself, not to make everyone comfortable with your healing. Seventh, accept that recovery isn't linear. You'll have good days and bad days. Days when you feel strong and days when you want to curl up and give up. That's normal. Healing isn't a straight line, it's a spiral. You'll revisit pain, but each time from a higher vantage point. Eighth, redefine success. For years, my success was measured by how well I served others, how happy my husband was, how successful my kids were. I had to learn that my success could be measured differently, by how I felt in my own life, by whether I was living according to my values, by whether I could look in the mirror and recognize myself. Research shows that people who've experienced significant betrayal often develop post-traumatic growth. Not just recovery, but actual growth beyond where they were before. They develop deeper empathy, stronger values, greater resilience, and more authentic relationships. The pain doesn't disappear, but it transforms into something that adds depth to who you become. I'm not going to lie and say it's easy. Recovery requires work. It requires facing truths you've been avoiding and feelings you've been numbing. It requires you to show up for yourself in ways you've never done before. But it's possible. I'm living proof. At 55, starting over felt impossible. Now, at 56, I can't imagine going back to who I was. Not because my life now is perfect, it's not, but because it's mine. If you're reading this and seeing yourself in my story, please know that you're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're someone who believed in something, in family, in loyalty, in the power of sacrifice. And that belief was exploited. That's not your fault. What happens next is your choice. You can stay in the story you've been living, or you can write a new one. It won't be easy. There will be moments when you want to give up, when the familiar pain seems easier than the unknown possibility of something better. But on the other side of that fear is a version of yourself who's been waiting, the you who takes up space, who has opinions and dreams and rights, who doesn't apologize for existing, who knows her worth. She's there, I promise. You just have to be brave enough to find her. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. I know it was long, and some parts were hard to hear, but I wanted to be honest with you, to share not just the dramatic moments, but the quiet ones too. The real healing happens in those quiet moments, in the daily choice to keep going. I'm curious, where are you listening from? What time is it there? Are you in your car on the way to work? In your kitchen making dinner? Lying in bed, unable to sleep? Wherever you are, thank you for being here, for listening, for letting my story maybe speak to something in yours. If this story resonated with you, If any part of it felt familiar or gave you hope or made you think, would you hit that like button? It helps more people find these stories, and maybe someone else needs to hear that recovery is possible today. And I have to ask, what would you have done in my place? Would you have confronted them differently? Fought harder? Forgiven faster? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one, and your perspectives matter. Sometimes I learn just as much from you as you do from me. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I share these real-life stories every week because I believe in the power of truth-telling, in the healing that comes from knowing you're not alone. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. And if you want to hear more stories like this, I've got 2 recommendations for you. Check out the story about the woman who discovered her husband's second family at her own surprise party, or the one about the mother who found out her daughter-in-law had been poisoning her slowly for 3 years. Both are about women who fought back and found themselves in the process. Until the next story, take care of your heart, protect your peace. And remember that you are never too old, never too invested, never too far gone to start again. The life you deserve is waiting. You just have to be brave enough to claim it.